Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now today we're taking a look at the new Radeon 890M graphics, the RDNA 3.5 Strix Point successor to the 780M graphics that you've seen me test so many times on this channel. To do this, of course, we need a system to test, and that has been provided by Beelink for today's video. This is the SER9, provided of course free of charge for purposes of review. That's why I've ticked the little paid promotion thing there, because they sent this to me for this video, though I'm sure I'll make more than one. So this thing features a Ryzen AI 9 HX370. It's a 12 core 24 thread CPU. We've got 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5X memory. This is soldered to the board, however it does run at 7500 megahertz, and I have seen some articles whereby reviewers have got it up to 8000 megahertz as well, which would be pretty cool to see. We're leaving everything at stock for this video, of course. I should mention that the price of this little unit is $999 at the time of this video. It works out at £765 and about 42 pence as of the time of recording. So I think you have to really be into this form factor in order to spend the money on it, or you just want the best sort of processing power to PC size case ratio that you can probably get, because this thing is certainly very capable despite utilizing about 54 watts at max. At least that's what I recorded during all of my tests today. I really like the aesthetic of this thing. It's giving me PS1 era vibes with the colour scheme, the grey colour scheme. This is available in two slightly different colours from the Beelink website. I'll leave a link down below. Of course, if you don't want to pay for one, you could always enter the competition that they're currently running on Reddit, which I believe has a few days left at the time of this video as well. I'll leave a link to that down below. They're giving away 5 units in total, and you've got a chance to win one basically, so I definitely recommend checking that out. But now we must check out the gaming performance as per the name of this channel, of course, Random Gaming in HD. So let's see what this little mini machine can do. Now for the gaming tests, I've actually tried out a few different settings. The first thing I did was just jump in at 1080p low without any upscaling and see how well these graphics did, and then I played around with things a little bit to see if we could turn things up while utilising FSR and seeing if we could still get a playable frame rate, whether that was at least 30 FPS in certain titles or closer to 60 in those FPS or esports games. We'll start with Cyberpunk 2077. So I started with 1080p in the lowest settings, and the 890M graphics here can actually achieve over 60 frames per second, well 60.8, so I'm going to round this up to 61 as I normally do. Not just that though, the 1.1% figures were pretty close together, which represents decent consistency here. I've no doubt that the 7500 MHz RAM within this thing is definitely helping us out. I have to say it's a very good experience indeed. I never thought we'd be playing a game like Cyberpunk at 60 FPS with native res at the lowest settings when I first started out testing integrated graphics about 10-12 years ago with my AMD Llano A4 3300. I then decided to bump things up a bit and I went with the medium preset. I also turned the crowds up to medium and turned the textures up to high. I also selected FSR 2.1 but put it to the balanced preset, and to my surprise it didn't look too bad. We were also seeing close to 60 frames per second, on average 57 was the exact result. A little worse in terms of consistency, but again I didn't expect anywhere near this in terms of performance even with the FSR preset enabled here. Balance doesn't actually look too bad, not with FSR 2.1. FSR's come quite a long way as well since the initial release, FSR 1.0 back in the day, and you could certainly tell you had it enabled even with the best quality preset. Now, of course, the 890M is capable of ray tracing, and I think if you're going to utilize ray tracing, you're going to want to set it to the maximum preset available. RT Ultra enables everything, including RT reflections here, but this does come at a cost to our performance. These are still integrated graphics at the end of the day, so they will still struggle with RT. FSR 2.1 was once again enabled, but I also selected Ultra Performance. This did average over 30 FPS, so 32 overall, but as you can see by those 0.1% numbers, there were a couple of little freezes. Next up I have The Last of Us here. This is the very low preset. Selecting this will actually turn everything down to its respective lowest. I also made sure that the resolution scaling was set to 100%, as I did with all other results outside of the FSR and upscaling tests. So very low preset here. The game still looks pretty good. We can definitely tell that we're running with lower visual options, but we saw 42 frames per second. I think in a slower paced third person title like this, at least 30 is definitely acceptable, but that just maybe my opinion coming from someone who used to play a lot on the PS3 back in the day. 42 overall with a 1% low of 32 and a 0.1% low of 21. This will dip a little bit to the mid 30s in action intensive scenes, but overall I think it's a fairly solid result here. I then chose the high preset to see if we could maintain at least 30 FPS, and we could, albeit with FSR3 set to quality. FSR3 is another step up, I think, in terms of how it looks over FSR 2.1. It is definitely harder to tell that you have it enabled, but it does mean that our performance is significantly higher than it would be at native. For example, here we're getting 38 frames per second. Not only that, but the 1% low of 33 and the 0.1% low of 31 represents a consistent result here too, and The Last of Us looks fantastic with these quality settings. For Red Dead Redemption 2 next, I went with the ultra textures and everything else set to lowest. No matter how low I go in this game, I have to insist to myself that I'll keep the texture set to ultra, and I'd suggest that you do the same if you can, because anything else looks like the game's not rendered properly. They can look quite muddy in my opinion, but 57 FPS overall here with frame rates that do go above 60 here and there. The 1% low was 47 and the 0.1% low was 43. So again, a nice result considering we're not using a discrete graphics card as part of the SER9 Beelink mini machine. With the DF or Digital Foundry console equivalent settings at 1080p, a lot of channels have their own optimized settings. I stick with the Digital Foundry ones, 44 frames per second here, which to me is more than playable in Red Dead Redemption 2, especially if you're playing in third person mode. The 1% low was 37 and the 0.1% figure was 35, so very consistent, very smooth, even in and around busier towns like Valentine. I did anticipate that Baldur's Gate 3 would give us some trouble, and even at 1080p with the low preset here, we did see a few dips and drops as represented by the percentile numbers. The average was 50, the 1% low was 29, and the 0.1% figure was 7. But overall, it was playable for the most part, it just didn't look that great. That said, turning things up to medium massively improved the visual quality in my opinion. We also have FSR 2.2 available here, and I set this to quality mode, which certainly made a difference. It's now running a lot smoother in my opinion, although our average isn't as high, 47 this time around. Despite having the quality FSR preset as well, everything looked a little bit sharper, and I definitely recommend a preset like this if you're using nothing but an iGPU, namely the 780M or 890M. GTA 5, well, no FSR, no upscaling available here, but we don't really need it because at the high settings with the detail sliders all set to halfway, anisotropic filtering set to X8, shadows set to soft and FXAA here. All the advanced options were also off and we still saw 89 frames per second. Even the 1% low was 61 and the 0.1% figure was 55. So no problems with maintaining at least 60 FPS as an average, or basically throughout our entire gameplay experience today. I remember when I first tested integrated graphics with GTA 5, I think it was the 680M actually with an older Beelink PC. There were a few stutters, a few dips and drops, so either the drivers have improved massively or just the architecture of these iGPUs have. Maybe it's a bit of both, but now it's certainly playable and consistently so. Counter-Strike 2 now, an online esports FPS title of course, so the more frames the better. Low preset will enable FSR by default, so I turned that off. Even doing so gave us 134 FPS on average with a 1% low of 66 and a 0.1% number of 34, so definitely playable on this iGPU solution, and there's not much else to say really. A very impressive result I feel for this mini machine. Fortnite up next, again 1080p with the low preset, 100% 3D res however, and TAA. It's going to default to like 80 something percent 3D res at low. and TAA may default to a different form of anti-aliasing, so I enabled it here. 134 frames per second, same as CS2, a 1% low of 88 and a 0.1% low of 34. Now these figures in particular were surprising because with Fortnite I usually have a lot more trouble. I usually get a lot more stutter. I was running on DX12 mode as well, which isn't trouble-free, or at least hasn't been for me in the past, but here it was really smooth, whether it's the latest AMD driver update, but Fortnite was really pleasant to play on this thing. We'll finalise then with Elden Ring, not as great, 50 FPS on average with the medium preset. It doesn't really make much of a difference at low either. The performance is all over the place, the 1% low 20, the 0.1% low 19, even when I went into the Radeon software and enabled super resolution to try and get upscaling at a driver level, it didn't really help much. So Elden Ring doesn't entirely agree with this iGPU solution. Overall though, I have had a great time with the Beelink SER9 Mini. I keep calling it SER9, it just SER9, but SER9 also sounds pretty cool. It's very impressive, the 890M graphics, the power they've packed into this mini enclosure, but you do have to bear in mind the price. Of course, I think if you want something like this, you really want this form factor and you want the most processing power or some of the best processing power you can get in an enclosure this small, then yeah, it's going to be for you. But don't forget that you can also buy gaming laptops and you can also build yourself a custom gaming PC for this sort of budget and get something that's going to run games at 1440p and possibly beyond too very smoothly. But I can't forget that this does cater to an entirely different audience, of course. The world of mini PCs and custom PCs and laptops are quite far apart in terms of consumer wants and needs, I think. So there we go. But as always, leave your thoughts down below. My first time testing the 890M graphics, and I am very impressed, to be fair, but let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.